What's going on, guys? Billy here, and when I first started flying drones, I pretty much only shot aerial video. I never branch out and take any aerial photographs, although over the past couple of months, things have completely changed. Everything is the opposite. I don't really take all that many video, but instead, I'm pretty much always shooting photographs. Now, an example of this is a trip that I took in early January up to Maine for about 5 days, and I did not return with one single aerial video clip. I only took photos the entire time that I was up there. Even over the past couple of days, I've set out to capture the countryside as a recent snowstorm rolled through my area, and I didn't even think about shooting any video, but instead I only focused on shooting aerial photographs. Now, if you guys want to check out some more photos from my trip up north to Maine, as well as some of those snow photos taken from my Mavic 2 Pro, I'm going to leave a link down in the description to my Instagram. You can go ahead, check those photos out, and connect with me over there. So because I've been focusing so much of my time shooting aerial photographs over the past couple of months, I figured I'd sit down and share with you some of the tips and tricks I've picked up along the way to help you up your general aerial photography game. Now, in the beginning of the planning process of this video, I had a question to answer. Should I cater it more towards the beginner that doesn't know all that much about aerial photography, or instead, should I cater it more towards the professional, right? The advanced photographer, and give them a couple of tips and tricks they could inject into their workflow? Well, instead, I'm going to meet you in the middle and cover my entire workflow from start to finish, the shooting process and the editing process, so that no matter what skill you're at, whether you're a beginner or an advanced photographer, you can take some of the tips and tricks that I give you to get the results that I get, that I post over on my Instagram, as well as I share sometimes here on my YouTube channel, like in this video in the beginning. Now, I also want to kind of put, I guess, a disclaimer in the video. It doesn't matter what drone you have. It doesn't matter if you've got a Phantom, an Inspire, a Mavic, an Autel Evo, a Parrot, a Nafi, a Skydio. Most of what I talk about in this video is going to pertain to most of the drones on the market. So it doesn't matter what drone you have. You're going to be able to get some great aerial photographs after you listen to everything that I say in this video and take away some of the tips and tricks that I share with you from my shooting and editing process. So in order to streamline and organize the structure of this video, I'm going to split things up into two different parts. First, we'll go over some shooting techniques. I'll cover things like the settings and different composition tips. And then in the second part, we're going to cover some editing techniques, because that's really how you make these photos come alive. Now, I think a really great place to start with this video is going over some of the different camera settings that I use when I'm capturing photos with my drone. Now, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to be using a Mavic 2 Pro, but remember, it doesn't matter what drone you have. Most of the settings I go over in this video can be found on your drone, the one that you're going to be shooting photos with. They might just be in different places. So don't pay attention to where I'm going in the menus, but pay attention to what I'm saying and the logic behind what I'm doing and why I'm changing some of the settings to the way that they are. So first of all, you're going to want to shoot raw photos, right? If you go to the camera settings, you go to the camera icon at the top, under image format, you choose raw. This is just an absolute no-brainer if you want to make the most of your photographs. Yes, the file size is going to be larger, but it's going to give you a lot more flexibility in post. There's really no arguing in my book. You're going to want to shoot raw photographs. It's just going to give you the best editing experience possible. Now, next, if you look here on my screen, I've got a center point and I've got some grid lines. So if we go into those camera settings and if we go to the gear icon, we can choose our center point as well as our grid. Now, I'm not a big fan of using the diagonals. In my opinion, they just kind of get in the way. Instead, I use the grid lines to frame up my shot, and I also use that center point to frame up my shot. Both of those really help me in my composition, and we're going to get into composition in just a second, but those are really great aids as you're shooting photographs. Now, next, I would say to turn on auto white balance. Now, if you're going to be shooting video, you obviously don't have as much control over the white balance, so you might want to go with a sunny white balance or a cloudy white balance, depending upon what the light looks like outside. But if you're shooting raw photographs, you have full control of the white balance after the fact when you're editing in posts, and there's really no reason to waste your time trying to set the white balance on the fly when you can fully change that later as you're sitting down. Now, the next tip that I'm going to give you in terms of the settings, this is the final thing that I want to say here, is to change your drive mode or the photo mode to auto exposure bracketing. Now, my drone here has the capability of shooting 3 photos or 5 photographs, and the great thing about this is it shoots different photos at different exposures, and I don't have to worry about nailing the exposure right as I'm shooting it. I can choose the perfect photo to edit after the fact, and this has saved me so many times. Not only can I blend multiple photos together if I have to, if I've got a really bright spot or really dark spot in my photograph to get more dynamic range, I can just choose a better starting point than if I was, say, shooting a single photo, right? When you're flying your drone, there's a whole lot going on. You can't look through the eyepiece of the camera, and you can't always be looking at the histogram. So I shoot auto exposure brackets because I'm able to then get back at my computer, go through the 5 photographs that are taken, and choose the best one to start with. Now look, are there other camera settings that could change the way you shoot photographs? Yes, but I think the ones I covered in this portion of this video are probably the most important that you could implement into your workflow to make your shooting process a whole lot easier. And I don't mean to harp on the whole auto exposure bracketing thing, but that has totally changed my photography workflow. No longer do I have to worry about nailing the exposure or bright spots or dark spots ruining my images. I get so much dynamic range that the editing process is such a breeze. And also the shooting process is even easier because I don't have to worry about looking at the histogram or changing my shutter. I let the camera do the work for me and I choose after the fact. It is a really great failsafe, and I've got to give a big thanks to my buddy Steve for teaching me the way of the bracket. Now, moving on, right? Cameras are set, everything is good, but none of that matters if you can't properly compose a shot. Composition is everything, and it's not something that I can teach you in this video. I think it's something that comes with experience, but let me give you a couple of tips from a drone flight I took the other day, flying around that smokestack, the photos that I just showed you, so maybe I can give you some tips on how to jumpstart shooting better composed images. Now, I think that everybody can agree that this right here is the typical drone shot, right? Put it up to 300 feet in the air, pitch the gimbal down -30 degrees around there, and then just let the shutter fly. And while I don't think that this is a horrible looking photo, I think it overall just lacks creativity. So something I like to do is to get the drone down a little bit, level out the horizon, straighten out the verticals right out of the camera, and then shoot from this vantage point. And this now gives us a whole lot more going on in the image. We've got the foreground element of the trees. We've of course got the main subject, which is the building and the smokestack. And in the background, we've got some trees, and now we've added the sky. This overall is a more pleasing image, and in my opinion, a more creative looking image. Also, I like to play with pitching the gimbal upward a little bit. I think that some people don't like to look upwards because they're afraid the props will get in the shot, but with most drones, if you pitch that gimbal upwards like -20 degrees, you're totally safe and you can get some really great looking photos. Now, of course, during this process, I was flying around like a maniac, trying different angles, trying different sections of the building to see if I could find any better compositions, but ultimately, I think the one I started off with was probably the best. Also, I tried playing around with like pointing the gimbal upwards a little bit again, see if I could get any great compositions. And here's another great tip for you. Don't be afraid to get close to objects. Like I said in the beginning, that typical drone shot, flying really high up and really far away, that's something that is very easy to do. But if you get a little bit creative and get close to subjects, that's where some of the best images are taken. Like this, you can see all the intricacy in these elements and in these different pieces of equipment, something you really wouldn't capture if you were further away. Now, of course, being a smokestack, you guys know I had to fly around the top portion of it. And while you might say this composition is boring because I just put the drone up and pitched the gimbal down to -30 degrees, kind of like I said in the beginning of this section, I think it's a really cool composition. You're up close with that smokestack. You've got the outside of the stack, you've got the inside of the stack, the different colors in bricks. Of course, you've got all of the different debris and kind of the different damage around the top, which is cool to see from the aging of the building. And you've got that backdrop element, the background element of the woods there with all of the leaves falling off the tree. So I think that this is a pretty stellar image and will look really good if you cropped it vertically. And that's why the center lines really come in handy, because you can make sure that if you crop vertically, you've got enough room there. Now, moving on, I had to do the typical top-down photograph of this smokestack, and I think it's kind of cool. I'm not one to do top-down photos because I think that, again, they're kind of boring. You can put the drone up as high as you want, look straight down, and yeah, that does it. But I think this photograph in particular looks cool because the background element is the ground, it's the building, the roof, the trees, and also you see down into the darkness of the smokestack. And you've got these like ladders on the side. I don't know who would climb up and down the ladders, but regardless, I really like this comp. So I hope that I did a good enough job at explaining composition to you guys. Again, I think it's something that's subjective, as is most things in photography. I also think it's something that's learned over time through practice. I can't just say, hey, this is how you shoot every single photograph, because different compositions will work with different things that you're shooting in different subjects. I would just say the one thing to take away from my whole spiel on composition is be creative. Don't just put the drone up at 300 feet, pitch the gimbal down, and shoot photos from there. Be creative. Sometimes I've only got the drone 20 feet high, and that's the best composition. So don't feel like you've got to fly far away or high. Just make sure that you're using some traditional photography concepts like the rule of thirds, leading lines, things like that, and you're going to get some great looking photos. Use those guides on the screen, the center lines and the center points, the grid lines, and you're going to shoot some great looking photos. Okay. Moving on to the second portion of this video, I think that this is probably a little bit more important than the shooting portion of the video, because editing is where the magic happens. This is where you can really make your image pop, but I think it's also where you see the most subjectivity, right? Because something I think looks good could not look that good to other people. I've seen some really wacky edits on images. People will change the skies, people will change colors, people will make them look really unnatural, but instead, I'm more of a natural type of guy. I like a natural looking photograph. So what I want to do is edit this photo with you guys, take you through step by step, kind of give you my thought process behind editing the photograph. And from there, you guys can take what I use into your own practices when editing, and maybe you guys can see what I do and say, I hate what he's doing, and do the total opposite. So again, this is subjective, but I think this is a really good starting point to make your photos look good. Now, I do have to say I use a preset to get myself to a spot where I'm pretty much fully edited, and then from there I make small tweaks, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna go from front to back editing this photograph. If you guys want, I'll put like some screenshots of the preset, I guess, that I use. Each panel I'm gonna put up here on the screen. You guys can go ahead, write those down, copy it down, make a preset for yourself, but that's what I use for basically every single drone, and then from there, I make small adjustments. Okay, so jumping into the photograph here, this was taken up in Newport, Rhode Island. It was just kind of as like summer was turning into the fall. Ken actually came up and flew up here with me, and I also have to give a shout out to Bob Fiore for showing me this spot because I was able to take such incredible photographs from here. Just to give you a sneak peek, this is what the photo looks like after I was done editing it. Again, it looks really natural. The colors are crisp. The details are nice and crisp. There's nothing that's over sharpened. I don't think that it's over processed in any way. I think that this is just a nice, neutral, natural looking image. The colors are jumping off of the screen, but it's not because I pumped them up too high. It's just because this spot was so perfect. The rocks are just beautiful. It's kind of like a leading line over to the left. You've got, of course, the subject, which is this house. I've got to say, this guy, whatever he does, he's doing pretty well for himself. Also, the blues and the water are really great. It's crashing up onto the rocks. And even though I probably could have run a sky replacement here, I just decided to leave it natural. The overcast didn't kill this image, in my opinion. I think that it still looks great. So yeah, at the end of the day, this was the final image that I was left with, but we are going to start from the beginning. So I will reset all of these panels. Now, I've got to say that I'm using the cloud version of Lightroom. I know that a lot of people are pushed away from this program because the classic version of Lightroom has so many different features, but at the end of the day, I really don't need all of that. I just need to be able to change the contrast, the colors, maybe the detail, the sharpness, and then I'm good. I can use the heal tool, the brush tool if I need to, and from there, this has everything that I use. So what we'll do is we'll start off with the light, right? Something I like to do is kind of bump the exposure, get a feel for what it looks like from here, and then I pretty much totally kill the highlights. I'll bring them almost all the way down and then also lift the shadows just to kind of see where I'm at with the dynamic range, right? I won't pull it up too much, maybe 40-ish, and then I'll also tone down the highlights because I want to retain a little bit of that information. So I'm going -90 on the highlights, +40 on the shadows. Now from here, I'll pump the colors up a little bit. So I'll go ahead and add 5 to the vibrance and 5 to the saturation. This way, I can kind of get the entire image globally to pump up in terms of the colors, but now I'm going to be a little bit more selective in what colors I want to be a little bit brighter. So from here, I'll tweak the whites and the blacks. Usually I like a nice bright image, so the whites will come up and the blacks will go down, sort of to improve on that dynamic range. So that is probably good right about there. I usually like to go with round numbers. I'm super OCD, so I'll go like +30, -20, right? So we're at a pretty good spot now. We can definitely see more of the image. It looks a little bit more well-rounded. It's not like super dark. Right out of the camera, it really doesn't look all that good. Okay, so from here, I think that the white balance right out of the camera was nailed pretty well. We might come back and change that a little bit, but now I'm going to focus on individual colors. Actually, first, I'm just going to jump down, remove chromatic aberration. I don't think it really needs a lens correction. It's pretty good right out of the gate. And then I typically like to bump my texture and clarity and dehaze up. So I'll do like 5 across the board here. See where that gets me. I think this is already a 48 megapixel image, so it retains a lot of the information. I don't want to over sharpen things here, so that's about good. We might come back to that. But now we're getting to the colors, and this is where you can really change your photograph. So I think first I want to tackle the water. We'll kind of change the hue, see what we can do. Again, I like natural looking blues. I don't want to go with something that looks like totally green or totally purple. So I'll probably bring this a little bit towards the purple side, and then also, of course, bump the saturation because I want some nice deep blues. And it's also a little bit dark down there, kind of sitting underneath of the rock. So I'll probably bump up the luminance in order to make it brighter. And with that, we're also going to want to also bump up the saturation because it does kind of take away from the colors. So right there is pretty good. I feel like around this area, this lone rock, those purples are a little bit overdone. So we'll try and tame those with just the purple control, which doesn't seem to have too much effect. It does a little bit. Maybe we'll try the pinks, the magentas. Sometimes it's just a trial and error game. All right, well, it's not too bad, so we won't worry too much about that. So we've focused pretty much on the water down here, right? We can also try to get some information out of there with the teals. Now, the one thing is I've totally lost my sky. It's totally blown out. So maybe I'll drag the luminance down to preserve some of the sky here. Maybe down a little bit more. And then I'll tweak the water directly through this teal instead, yeah. So that'll work. So I'm not totally changing the sky up. So that's a good spot for our water. Now let's go ahead and try the greens. I think that the greens here are really important because we've got a lot of orange and we've got a lot of like yellow in some of the dead grass and some of like the weeds or some of the tall grass. And also we've got a lot of orange in terms of the rocks. So we'll change the greens here to really make them pop. We'll probably bring them to more of a green color instead of a yellow color to give them more of that pop and of course up the saturation here. So you'll notice that with those greens, if we totally change it to yellow, you kind of get this drab feel over the image. So I'll really pump those greens, pump up the saturation, and even in the yellow, I'm going to add a little bit of green. Not too much because it kind of makes the photo look sickening. Like if we go all the way on the green scale, it just looks like too much. So I'll start from the center and add a little bit of green, but that's it. And also pump the saturation here. So even though we could globally adjust the saturation over everything, I like to have direct control of the saturation in each of the elements of this image. All right, so it's looking pretty good. I feel like the water is a little bit too teal. Maybe we'll bump it this way and add some luminance. Oh, I'm actually right in the blues. We'll go to the teals themselves. So that's looking pretty good. I think that this looks relatively close to where we got with that first image. I think that I actually like that first edit better. Go figure. I feel like it's maybe a little bit too cool though. So typically the white balance is something you want to correct off the bat, but after you change around the color, sometimes directly changing the white balance can also have a pretty good effect. So we'll change the slider, moving it up. We don't want to go too far. Maybe only bumping it up by like 150. So we'll do 5,950. Maybe that's even a little bit too warm. So maybe 5,900. That looks okay. And then let's see if we can change some of the magenta. Maybe add a little bit of magenta in there. All right, so this is a pretty good looking image. I mean, definitely a stark difference from what we had right out of the camera. It definitely makes the colors pop a little bit. Unfortunately, because this is a live video and I'm doing this here all in one take, I can't get it perfect as to how my other image was, but I'll put that exported image up here on the screen. This was my final result. Oh, you know what? The one thing I didn't change. Screw that. I'm going to add a little bit of orange in here. Yeah. That's the one thing that I missed. The orange is big because of the rocks. The rocks did seem a little bit dull. Okay, so that adds a little bit, but regardless, I'm going to put the final image up here on the screen. This is what I originally edited, and I think I uploaded something or posted something like this over to my Instagram, but this right here is the power of putting everything that I showed you guys to use in one drone flight. The composition piece of it, the shooting settings piece of it, as well as the editing piece of it, and I think I came out with a really great looking image. And with that, you guys, that about wraps up this video. You now know my entire workflow from start to finish when I'm shooting photos with my drone. You saw the settings I use. You kind of got to look into my mind in terms of what I do when I'm trying to find the right composition, and also you got to look at my editing style. I think that preset that I showed you guys is really going to help you out. Get started on your image, then from there you can make little minute changes. But at the end of the day, when you're editing a photograph, one is very subjective. You are free to edit your photo however you'd like, and when you shoot raw photos, you can really push those files around to get some cool stylistic looking images. But also at the end of the day, it's a trial and error game. You could try one thing and it doesn't look great, and you've got to go back and re-edit it. I mean, half the time when I'm editing my photos, I'll edit them one night, close my laptop, go upstairs, fall asleep, and then look at them with a fresh set of eyes the next day. Photography, as I've said, is entirely subjective. I'm a huge fan of natural, clean looking images, and I think that that's what a lot of other people like, so that's why I wanted to share with you guys my workflow here in this video. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, and also let me know down in the comment section if you learned anything in this video, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.